This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
From Philadelphia to Erie, from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome.
Hi, Charlie.
Why, it's fall, and we're getting ready for Halloween.
We are, yeah.
Which political character do you want to dress up as?
Well, I think I'm going to be something a little bit scary this year, and it's more of a thing than a character. I think I'm going to be an unfinished budget. I haven't quite figured out what that looks like yet, but I think that's what I'm going to be. Well, how about you?
We've had a lot of exposure to that.
Yes, we have.
And I don't know. I thought maybe I'd dress up as Senator Casey, and I'm going to be carrying a nuclear bomb, and I'm looking for Iranians to give it away to.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, we're fortunate with us today to talk about the political season, and who better to talk about the political season than Dave Patti. Dave, thank you for joining us. Dave, you are the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Business Council. We welcome you back.
Thanks.
Maybe one of the top races that we ought to take a look at is the Senate race here in Pennsylvania. We have Senator Toomey is trying to have a second term, and how's that shaping up, Dave?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people are looking forward. Of course, in a couple of weeks we have elections here for Supreme Court justice, which is going to matter, and other judicial and local elections. Mm-hmm. But people are looking forward to 2016. The presidential race has been sucking up a lot of the oxygen for the last few months. But increasingly, since the summer, focus has been turning to the U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. That's kind of the top of the ticket here for next year. And we have, as you said, Senator Toomey looking for his second term. He had been in the U.S. House for 3 terms, had term limited himself and left, challenged Senator Arlen Specter way back in 2004. It seems like a millennium ago.
It does seem a long time ago.
A lot has changed, and now he's the incumbent. With at the moment 3 challengers: Joe Sestak, former congressman, retired admiral, U.S. Navy. Then, of course, Katie McGinty, who had a brief cup of coffee with the governor as his chief of staff, and John Fetterman, who jumped in back in September. Mayor of Braddock out in Allegheny County, interesting person. I don't know if he's a game changer, but certainly a fresh face. And the year where we've seen Bernie Sanders do so well, Donald Trump do so well, Ben Carson do so well at the presidential, the outsiders. Who knows what Fetterman brings to this race?
Mm-hmm. I've seen a couple of profiles on Fetterman, so I don't think he can be discounted as a candidate, even though it seems like he's jumping in a little bit late. Maybe not late, but
well, it's not so much late as where's he going to get the money and everything else. But in the age of Twitter and social media, you have the ability to reach voters and constituents without spending a lot of money. So it could be interesting. But still, we are waiting for money reports. Pat Toomey went through the summer with over $8 million on hand and has been raising money, a considerable amount of money. We'll have to see what it is the others can bring. Joe Sestak in the summer had about $2 million on hand, but was not raising at the level he even had 6 years ago rather. So we'll have to see what he can do. Emily's List, a political organization that contributes to left-leaning women candidates, had endorsed this summer, their favorite in Katie McGinty. They don't so much give as bundle, so they will go to donors and women all over across the country who will give them money that they can then give to the right candidates. So they will direct money her way. That will mean a lot in terms of the air wars with the TV commercials and everything like that.
Dave, in this Senate race that's coming up, it seems that with the exception of Mayor Fetterman from Braddock, all the other candidates are from the East. Could this phenomena develop that all of Western Pennsylvania rallies behind the candidate from the West and gives an unexpected, perhaps, boost to Fetterman?
In the Democratic primary, that could play well. What we will expect is, of course, we'll have to see where the presidential race is. Is there a Democratic primary by the time we get to Pennsylvania in April? We always move, in presidential years, we move the Pennsylvania primary from May to April. We move it up a couple of weeks to be a little more relevant. And it mattered in 2008 when Hillary Clinton almost launched a resurgence against Barack Obama in Pennsylvania, where she had been trailing and made sort of a comeback here. So we'll have to see what happens, and who does that bring out? So Western Democrats coming out to the polls next April because he's a Westerner, could tip something. In current polling, and obviously there's a long way to go, in current polling, interestingly enough, Katie McGinty polls better against Toomey. I should start by saying Toomey beats the entire field in current polling. Katie McGinty does better against him, loses by less than does Joe Sestak, but Joe Sestak beats Katie McGinty and Fetterman, in the early polling. Fetterman not being known yet.
They have a lot of work to do. Right. Everyone has a lot of work to do.
Excuse me. Yes. And part of that is that Joe Sestak really appeals better to the more left-leaning, far left liberal base of the Democratic Party. And as we know in American politics anymore, the extremes tend to control the primary process. So in fact, we have this anomaly where to win your party's primary, you have to play either to the left if you're a Democrat or to the right as a Republican. But to win in November, you have to come back to the center. And the Democratic candidates will have that problem against Pat Toomey. Unless somebody pops up, in the latter moments, Pat Toomey will not have a primary challenge. One might argue, ironic, given that he put his name on the map by challenging Arlen Specter. But also, interesting that, in fact, I'm losing track of time, 2-3 years ago, he was getting some social media grief from conservatives that, what happened to Pat Toomey? He's now working with Joe Manchin on a gun registration bill. He's working with Democrats. Remember we had that grand budget committee a couple of summers ago, and he was getting credit from everybody, from both sides of the aisle, being the only adult in the room who actually wanted to compromise and reach a deal. And so it's funny. Pat Toomey for a while, guy who was president of Club for Growth, now getting grief from the right wing saying, what happened to you? But I think obviously plays well for him in November of 2016 and will play well with a lot of mainstream Pennsylvania voters who want that. They want somebody in Washington who works cooperatively, works on both sides.
Well, I absolutely want to talk about the presidential race with you because I love your perspective on things. I kind of want to do a rapid fire thing, but I'll just Donald Trump. What do you think?
Bad hair.
Bad hair.
None of us obviously look. I'm stating the obvious. Nobody thought he would go this far. What's the deal? It's either he's going to get bored and get out. He's not going to do well. People are going to catch on to the joke. So I'm like the rest of the pundits going, really?
I originally loved what he was bringing to the race, which was people were becoming engaged. People who never watched debates were watching debates, and all of that's very positive. Anytime you can engage more voters or citizens, it's a good thing. So I too thought he might be out by now. It's a big field. They're starting to drop. The players are starting to drop. The opponents are starting to drop. Who do you think are going to be his biggest challengers, assuming that this wave continues?
Well, remember back, it seems like ages and ages and ages ago, but 4 years ago, where every month somebody else was the front runner for the Republican Party. And Rick Santorum, in fact, was the last front runner, which means he was supposed to get the first shot this year, but it's not working that way. But we continue to have the so-called outsiders doing well in Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina. Governor Walker faded pretty quickly. Governor Kasich, kind of holding his own. I think he's someone to watch. I would never count a Bush out. Just the money, the name ID, everything else. While the name ID works both ways, he can be in it and can stay in it and can hang around. But at some point we have to get into substance. And I think that's where it gets interesting. You had that poll back in late August. Where they asked people, did like a Rorschach test. What's the first word that comes to your mind when you think of people? And they said Hillary Clinton and was dishonest, untrustworthy, words like that. For Jeb Bush, first word that came to mind was Bush, as being the problem. But for Donald Trump, it was arrogant. He's at some point he has to transcend the celebrity and the kind of bad boy image of arrogance into I could be a world leader.
Right.
And we'll have to see
there
what
hasn't
happens.
been a whole lot of substance behind what he's said so far.
Right.
And
I mean, whether you like it or not, Jeb Bush and others are putting out tax plans that are have some meat to them.
Right. Agree or not.
Immigration plans, that kind of thing. So.
Well, I would disagree with both of you. I think Donald Trump's made himself more available to the press than anyone else, and he is showing substance. He sat down and Sean Hannity was cross-examining him the other day. Rush Limbaugh has cross-examined him, asking for the substance, and he has it there when he's asked it. He was somewhat surprising in that regard, but a lot of people think that because of the, if you will, the grandstanding that he's so good at, that that he doesn't have substance.
Well,
but
he's obviously thought about these issues and grappled with some of these issues as a business person, so I'll grant you that. But policy design and policy implementation, I still think, are a little more difficult than sound bites.
Let's go back for a second to the Senate race. Dave, why do you think, is it fair to say that Joe Sestak has trouble gaining traction? Here is someone who has all the credentials.
He had plenty of traction when he ran over that toddler over the summer at a rally. But
he has all the credentials to be a great U.S. Senator, one would think, with the retired Navy admiral, and you think this man was born to be a senator, and but yet he doesn't catch fire. What's going on with him?
People meet him. I mean, he's great on paper. He is.
He doesn't light the world on fire.
He doesn't. Well, yeah. I mean, there are two things. One is the substance of his speeches are just often pretty good, and even some of the one-liners that he puts in as applause lines, I actually kind of like. About young men and women serving their country in the Navy, and what he saw from them and everything. But yes, he's not a dynamic, charismatic speaker and leader, but also. He has real problems with arrogance and with playing well in the sandbox, and that's why Katie McGinty's in the race. I mean, his own fellow Democratic leaders, Bob Brady, congressman from Philadelphia and political boss of Philadelphia, Mike Doyle from Pittsburgh, the senior member of our delegation, turned their back on him, did nothing to help him, and embraced Katie McGinty, encouraged Katie McGinty, or encouraging supporters to get behind her because he doesn't play well. For some people, the Donald Trump thing, that's a good thing. They say, look, I'm the outsider. But he's never managed to turn that corner. And I think a lot of people who have been around him in campaigns just find his demeanor to be a turnoff.
Well, I'm going to ask you to be a betting man. When do you think the budget impasse will be over with? It may be over with by now, but if you were
Because we're taping this a little early?
Yeah. By Christmas?
Yes, in that we are now rapidly approaching the time where, in fact, the people in the agencies are delivering to the budget office and to the governor's office their estimates for next fiscal year. And they have to start, that really gets serious in November. In December, the governor truly has to get serious because they are now making decisions in January. Because remember, he got an extra month for being a new governor last year. In this coming year, he'll have to deliver his budget message in the beginning of February, which means it all has to be ready to be printed and everything else by January. So I think there will be a lot of pressure on everybody to get something done. I was saying in mid-September, do something that's a partial budget so that you could always do supplementals and come back if the economy looks better. So I'm still hopeful that people will try and say, look, let's get half a loaf.
Okay. So well, Dave, we want to thank you for being with us. You didn't tell us what you're going to dress as for Halloween.
Not a big Halloween dresser person.
Okay, we'll let you off the hook. But you got to come back in the near future and tell us what you did dress as. Meanwhile, we're going to talk about the courts coming up in this next segment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by Blackford Ventures, LLC, a private equity firm seeking to make significant investments in real estate, proven business enterprises, and their leaders. Find out more at www.blackfordventures.com. And by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. On this segment, Maura and I are joined by Lynn Marks. Lynn is a longtime veteran, a crusader for merit selection of judges here in Pennsylvania. You are the executive director for Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. Could you tell us a little bit about your organization and a little bit about, it seems, your lifelong crusade to bring Pennsylvania to merit selection of judges?
Right. Well, thanks for having me on. Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts is a statewide, nonpartisan organization, and we believe strongly that all Pennsylvanians should be able to come to court with confidence that their judges and their cases will be heard by judges who are qualified, fair, and impartial. And underneath everything that we do at Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, it's a belief that everybody should have a fair shake in court. Nobody should feel that their opponent has a leg up because they were part of an organization that endorsed the candidate or made a large contribution to the judge. So we don't only work for merit selection of judges. We've been working for a fairer court system when it comes to improving the jury system, better court interpreters for jurors, trying to get money out of campaigns. And we do a lot of work with people who don't understand the courts. We do public education, and we also help people who feel like they got a bum rap in court, that somehow the judge, the lawyers were unfair, and we walk them through what they might do. We don't encourage them to file complaints against judges and lawyers, but we're basically a resource for people if they do have concerns about the court system.
So our current process of selecting judges is through elections, which are inherently political. So explain what exactly is merit selection. How would that differ? I mean, why is that better?
Right. Well, people don't know really how judges are selected at all. I mean, it's not that voters are stupid. There's just so much more attention paid to people who sit in the executive branch, like governors and mayors and presidents, or people in the legislative branch, in the state house or senate or Congress. So in Pennsylvania, we elect all levels of our judges in partisan elections, which means that judges run on a party line. We're one of only 9 states, actually, that elect all of our judges in partisan elections. And this is from the top of the state Supreme Court down to the magisterial district judge at the lower level. A growing number of organizations are concerned that in order to become a judge, and we're particularly concerned about the judges who sit on the statewide level, the appellate courts, that's the Supreme, the Superior, and the Commonwealth Court. And a growing number are concerned that it takes so much money to run a successful campaign that candidates end up crisscrossing the state, seeking huge endorsements, huge contributions, and endorsements from lawyers and special interest groups who might appear before them once elected. So it's important for people to realize that judges are different. The role of judge is different from people in the legislature and the government and in the governor's office, where those judges take positions on issues and we vote for them because we agree or don't agree. And judges, though, are supposed to make impartial decisions in individual cases based on the facts and the law, and not according to what they said on the campaign trail, and not according to what their contributors want. And so one of the reasons that a lot of groups now are saying we should get our statewide judges out of the campaign business, out of the fundraising business, and change how they're selected.
Well, who would select then? Who would make this decision?
Yeah, it's a good question. Under the term merit selection, it means that it's only for the statewide judges. So common pleas and magisterial district judges, municipal court judges would still be elected. But under merit selection, a bipartisan citizens group commission of lawyers and non-lawyers would screen and evaluate applicants according to particular qualifications and make recommendations of the top 5 to the governor. Governor must select somebody from that list, and after a Senate confirmation, the judge would sit for a shortened term of 4 years and then go before the people in a nonpartisan retention vote. So should Judge X stay on the court for a full 10-year term? So it's a hybrid of appointing and electing judges.
This is what is called the Missouri system in some states where you have this combination, this hybrid system, and it generally receives high marks. It seems to work very well, Lynn.
Well, the important part, we believe, is to get money out of the judicial selection system and to have a system which is really designed to get the most qualified, fair, and impartial judges. And that's not to say we don't have plenty in Pennsylvania, but they have to go through a process which is not only so political, but involves so much money. And one of the big differences, and I think why it's more crucial now, is the Citizens United case, the United States Supreme Court. Even more money are coming into these judicial elections. And we're one of the few states that have unlimited campaign contributions. So the combination of unlimited campaign contributions and judges supposed to be, an impartial referee, it just makes for a system where too many people think that some litigants and some lawyers are going to get a leg up in court.
Mm-hmm. Well, this seems to make complete sense. Why isn't this happening? This isn't a new idea. This has been around for many, many years.
Right.
And it's had some gubernatorial support over the years. Why are we not a merit selection state?
Well, first of all, it requires a constitutional amendment, and it is hard to change the Constitution, as it should be. I mean, it should be. And under a constitutional amendment, the legislature passes a bill in 2 consecutive sessions and then goes before the people in a referendum vote. So, yes, all the living governors have supported it at some point. It's in some ways
it has to get to them.
The governor doesn't actually sign the bill.
Oh,
it just goes before the people. So only the people can change this to change the way we select our statewide judges. I think one of the problems is a lack of understanding, first of all, by folks about why judges are different. And we believe, and a growing number of citizens groups, like the League of Women Voters and Common Cause and legal groups, bar association groups, and business groups, think that it's important to change it. But we need to let people know that judges are different, and they're not there just to satisfy, or not just, but to satisfy their campaign contributors. So I think that that's part of it. Because the role is different, we believe they should be selected differently and not in partisan elections. And there are also a number of groups that are, very opposed to change and want to keep the status quo. But one thing I've found is that even people who disagree with changing to a merit selection system and want to still elect judges, even they will concede that the current system just doesn't put a high premium on qualifications. The parties are looking for candidates, not that they don't care about qualifications, but what they want is candidates who can win. And often that's people who can prove that they can raise money and run a good campaign. And the reality is the qualities to become a good appellate judge aren't always the same qualities that makes a good campaigner and can raise money and speak to groups. And again, I'm not down on the judges. I mean, it's the system. It's the system that's basically requiring them to be statewide politicians.
Well, Lynn, whereas I agree with you that Pennsylvania has some superb and excellent judges, maybe some of the finest in the country, we also have had a generation of judicial embarrassments, judicial scandals, everywhere from the district justice level all the way to the Supreme Court, where we had to impeach a Supreme Court justice several years ago. And a lot of it seems to be attributed to the fact that when we go to elect our judges, the general voter, the average voter, knows nothing about them. And this has been exacerbated until recently when the Supreme Court struck it down. Our judicial candidates in Pennsylvania hide behind something called the canon of judicial ethics, where they say we can't talk about any positions on any issues because we will prejudice ourselves in future cases. Well, the United States Supreme Court has said that is not the case, and they can talk about issues if they would choose to do so. And many of them continue to hide behind it and continue to think or to present the case that it's still there and we're not allowed to talk about issues. I think it's laziness, and I think it's a wariness to commit. What is your judicial philosophy? I think perhaps if the people knew that, maybe they could vote more intelligently. I don't know.
Well, you raised a whole bunch of issues there, Charlie. I mean, it's true that, I mean, if you look at poll after poll, people just don't know who the candidates are. They don't know enough, they tell us, to make meaningful decisions. It's not that they're stupid voters or
Right.
not stupid at all.
Right.
They have a lot of other things going on in their lives, and it's very hard to get really crucial, information
Yes.
to make an informed choice. So that's one of the things, is that people don't know. Another thing is that polling shows over and over again that people think that judges make decisions according to who contributes to their campaigns. It's extraordinary, the numbers, and we're concerned about that because when you go to court, you want to have, a fair and a partial person. I mean, that's, who you want settling your disputes. You also, you talked about some of the scandals on the court, and it's true, former Justice Joe Melvin was actually convicted of campaign corruption, which wouldn't have happened if she didn't have to be elected in the first place. But you also raised an issue in terms of what judges can and can't say on the campaign trail. And it's true, now judges or judicial candidates are permitted, they don't have to, but they're allowed to say where they stand personally on general issues. So I'm allowed to say, I'm pro-life or I'm pro-choice. But I can't say, if an abortion case came before me, that this is how I would vote. And that's really important. I mean, I don't want to go before a judge who's...
Lynn, we've run out of time.
Oh, no,
I'm
okay.
so sorry. This is just
iceberg,
rush
right?
past us. Will you come back?
We're having a Supreme Court forum, so we need to let everybody know that. So
On
people can learn about our Supreme Court candidates.
Thank you. On October 14th at Widener Law School, we're having a forum for all the Supreme Court candidates, and they're all expected to attend.
Thank you very much, and we hope they will. We'll see you next week with a new edition of Behind the Headlines. Tune in then.